Imaginary and complex numbers. I can almost hear the groan from here. And it's summertime. All right, I'll let you talk about imaginary numbers.
So probably last year was the first time that you came across the square root of a negative number and your head didn't explode, or maybe it exploded after you learned about it. But when we come to the square root of a negative number, the simplest one is -1. And we have a name for that. Let's just call the square root of -1 I. Okay. I for imaginary. I squared then is going to be, well, these things are equal, right? They're kind of interchangeable. Okay, so I squared, we could say, is the square root of -1 times the square root of -1. Square root of -1 times square root of -1, these cancel out, and I'm left with -1 times -1.
No, you're left with.
I'm sorry, left with -1.
You might want to think about it this way. You say square root of -1 squared. These two cancel each other out, and you're left with -1. Does that work?
Yep. Okay. So I cubed then, isn't that going to be I squared times I? Right? So we can write that I squared times I. Well, we already figured out that I squared was -1. And then, well, I is the square root of -1, but let's just leave that as I. So -1I, or just -I.
Yeah, can we clean up a little bit? So what do we have, -1 and then -I?
Yep.
Is that what we were at? So -1, oh, and then you said this was I.
Yep.
And then -I. Is that?
Yep.
All right.
Okay. And then I to the 4th, well, we're just going to take I cubed times that by I. Right? Well, I cubed is said as -I times I. And we said up here that I times I was -1. Well, -I times I is going to be a +1. Should we go in more depth on that one, or is that?
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
And then doesn't it creates a pattern then, and then a pattern just goes over and over and over. Is that correct?
Right. Exactly.
All right.
So I to the 5th then is just going to be I.
Yep. So you started right here again.
Yep. And then we go down to I to the 6th. That's going to be -1. Okay. So we're going here, and then I to the 7th is going to be -I. Right. So we're going here.
And then the pattern just keeps going.
Cycles every
So I to the 8th would be the next one down, would be 1. And then I to the 9th, where are we at? We starting over again?
Yep.
And then I to the 10th would be -1 and so on.
Right.
All right? I think we probably taught you a way to divide by 4 and see what the remainder is. And
Yep.
if the remainder was 1, then the answer's that. And if the remainder was 2, then the answer's that. The remainder is 3. There can't be a remainder of 4 because we're dividing by 4. So
Right.
if the remainder was 0, the answer was 1.
We're back.
All right. I always tell my students that if you're ever going to get a tattoo, get this one. I squared is -1. That'd be the best tattoo. In fact, you should talk the person in front of you in the class to get it on the back of their neck. So when you're taking the test, their I squared is -1. All right. So simplify. These are complex numbers because they have a number part and an imaginary part. So if you're adding or subtracting, you just do them in separate, like terms. So 3 plus 2 is 5, and -2i plus -4i is -6i. All right. Multiply away. So
Now, if we're multiplying them, we're also going to kind of treat I like a variable, in the sense that when we FOIL this, we're going to end up with like an I squared in there. All right, so we've got, we're going to FOIL this thing. We're going to take 3 times 4, right? The first is going to be 12. And then we're going to take the outer 3 times 5i. Well, that's going to be 15i. Okay, and then we're going to take the inside, that's -2i. Times 4, so that's going to be -8i. And then that last term there is going to be a -2i times 5i. All right, so that's going to be a -10. And this is I times I is I squared. Okay, and now we're just going to combine like terms and kind of simplify as best we can here. So the first thing I'm going to see is that this 12, nothing's going to happen to it. 15i minus 8i, that's going to be 7i plus 7i. learned earlier on that I squared changes to a negative 1. So that's going to be negative 1 times the negative 10 plus 10. Okay. And then we've got one more set of like terms. We can add the 12 and the 10. 12 plus 10, at least in this universe, is 22. Plus 7i. And then I think we're as simple as we can get it. There.
Cool, good job. All right, let's do the beast here. For some reason, we said we don't like to have square roots on the bottoms of fractions. Since I is the square root of negative 1, this fraction isn't written in, it's kind of like using the word ain't in the English department.
It'd be okay for a physicist, not for a mathematician.
Yes, we don't, we don't like I in the bottom for some reason. So we've got to get rid of that. And to do that, we're going to multiply by the conjugate of the bottom. The conjugate of the bottom. So the conjugate of the bottom is going to be 3 minus 2i. So all you do is change the sign, go from a plus to a minus. And you do the exact same thing on the top. So really we're not doing anything, we're multiplying by 1 because there we go. All right, and Mr. Creswell taught you how to FOIL, so we're going to FOIL rather fast. 2 times 3 is 6. Outer times outer is negative 4i minus 15i. What's negative 4i minus 15i? Negative 19i. And then last times last is going to be positive 10i squared. Over, first times first is 9. Outer times outer is negative 6i. Inner times inner is positive 6i. Hey, those are gone.
Cool.
That's why you use the conjugate in the first
That's why
place.
it works. That's all.
All right. Last times last, negative 4i squared. Clean up. Clean up. Clean up, everybody, everywhere. Remember, I squared is negative 1, so positive 10i squared is the same as minus 10. So we have 6 minus 10 is negative 4 minus 19i. Well, that's a 19. Over, negative 4i squared. I squared is negative 1, so negative 4 times negative 1 is positive 4. So this is actually plus 4. 9 plus 4, 13. You happy with that answer, Mr. Creswell?
I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with that too.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I see students take and go, okay, well I've got this junk on the bottom. I'm going to multiply it by the junk over the junk and not change the sign, and then you end up kind of messing up in the big mess. So I think remembering to change the signs.
It's a bunch of junk.
Ultimately.